Welcome back to my cabin. Hope everyone is doing fine. As I said before, I would like to create this series of videos to explain a bit better what I'm doing and why I decided to do certain things the way I did, and just to explain a bit more into the detail about certain techniques that I used on building the log cabin and also preparing the logs and pretty much everything that is involved when building a log house like I'm building. Also, I've been getting quite a few comments from people that are about to build their own house, or they wish to build their house, but I don't know, maybe they don't have enough experience or knowledge. And I hope through this series and also through my other videos, this will help you to maybe understand a bit better how to build a log cabin. And I'm gonna talk just about the way that I've built my log cabin. There's pretty much thousands of other ways to do it. I decided to do the full scribe technique. To me it just looks the best, and I really like the challenge of doing it. I know there are other maybe easier ways to do it, but to me this way attracted me the most. And the first thing, before we even start building the log cabin walls, that I found really important, and I'm realizing now how much time is saving me, is to, when you are peeling, or if you buy the logs already prepared and peeled, that you measure the diameter of the log on each end. And I call the big end the butt and the small end the tip of the log. So you measure the diameter of butts and all the tips of the logs that you will be using for the walls, and also for the rest of the cabin, for the roof and whatever other things that you will be building. You can also measure the middle of the log. That way you will be able to calculate the averages a bit more accurate. You can also calculate the average of middle of all the logs just by having the tip and the butt diameters. You start by adding up all the butt diameters, and that number you divide by the number of the logs that you will be using for the walls. So you get the average of the big end of the log. You do the same for the tip, and when you have those two numbers, you just add them together and you divide by 2, and you get the average of all the wall logs in the middle span of the log. That number is important because you can calculate how many logs you will need to come to the height that you want to have with the wall. Otherwise you will be guessing and you will not know exactly how many logs you need. Maybe you will have to get more, or maybe you will end up not having enough logs. And there's other reasons that I will talk about later why this number is really helpful to have. Another thing to look for when you are getting the logs or cutting down the trees, in my opinion, the wall logs shouldn't be smaller than 25 centimeters at the tip. And the reason for that is that the logs smaller than 25 centimeters will not provide so much insulation for the house. The bigger the logs, the better it is for the insulation, and also it's easier to cut the notches. Plus, if you have bigger logs, you will use less logs to build the same height of the wall. For example, if you have logs that are in average 40 centimeters, you will need just 8 courses of logs to come to almost 3 meters. But if you have the logs that are around 20 centimeters, you will need almost double the number of logs. And with each extra course of logs, you will also need more sealing gasket between the logs, more steel or stone wool, sheep wool, whatever you are putting in the long groove. So that just adds up to the cost and the time that you need to build the walls. The bigger the logs, the better it is. But also if you go with the logs that are 1 meter in diameter or more, you also need to know that you will have to lift those logs, and you need to know if you will be able to lift logs this big. So thinking ahead what you will be able to do or afford can really save you a lot of frustration later, because if you realize that you will not be able to lift the logs that you already prepared and peeled, then that can be a big problem. Also, what you need to know when you are calculating how many logs you will need, for example, to come up to 3 meters, that with each log, when you are scribing it and when you cut out the long groove, then you lose around 1 inch, or let's say around 3 centimeters of the log. So for example, if you have the average diameter in the middle span of the log 30 centimeters, and you want to know how many logs you need to come up to 3 meters with the wall, if you would just divide 3 meters with 30, you would need 10 logs. But you need to understand that with each log you lose on an average around 3 centimeters. So 10 multiplied with 3, you get 30 centimeters of loss due to scribing and notching the logs. So actually, to come up to 3 meters with the wall with the average of 30 centimeters per log, you would need 11 logs and not 10. You always have to remember that you lose around an inch or 3 centimeters of the log when you are scribing. Also, when you are selecting the next log, you have to take that loss into account. Then what you need to understand is the placement of the logs on the walls, and it's really crucial that you alternate the logs when you are placing them on the wall. If you look one side of the wall, each log is alternated. First the small end is on one side, and then the log that comes on top, it's the big end, and then the small, and then the big. And you need to repeat this, especially if the logs are like mine and they change a lot from the big side to the small. You can clearly see here there's almost a 20 centimeter difference from the big end to the small end, and probably doing the mistake and facing 2 logs one on top of the other with the big end would cause the wall to go out of the level, and that would make it really hard to come back into the level with the wall. It's way easier if the logs are more even on both sides, but it's also possible to build it with pretty much any kind of logs. You will have a bigger challenge to select the right logs, but the end result, I think, is really amazing. Having these big ends and then small and big, to me this gives a lot of character to the house. Something that you can also plan ahead, especially if the height of your doors and the windows is fixed and it needs to be exactly like it is in the plan, then you need to know where the header of the door and the windows will be looking at the log, because if the door header comes right in the middle between 2 logs, or you are left with just a small piece of the log here, that's not the best idea, and it weakens the wall. What you are trying to go for is having the door header and the windows somewhere in the middle span of the log, and you can predict that, as I said before, if you know the average diameter in the middle span of the logs, then you can calculate where you will be at the height where the door should be, or the windows. And if, let's say, for example, the door header would come somewhere right in the middle between 2 logs, or in the top part of the bottom log, then you can change this height by changing the size of the sill log. If you put the first sill log full log, or if you cut the third away or the half, that will change everything up the wall where the middle of the logs will be. So you can adapt a bit where the middle of the logs will be depending on the windows and the doors with your sill log. In my case, my build is a bit more of a freestyle, so I don't worry so much about that. I will make the doors and the windows, everything custom, so I will be able to adjust freely wherever I will want to cut out the windows. But if you have a fixed heights of door and windows, then adjusting the sill log to what you need is really important and will get you out of a lot of trouble. Also, if you have the window header somewhere up here, the log will not cover the frame of the window and the rain will be going inside the house. So that's another reason for having the window somewhere in the middle of the log, so that it covers the window frame and it prevents rain from coming in from above the frame window. Also, another important thing that you can adjust with the size of the sill log is if, let's say, for example, you need to have your floor joist of the loft at 2.5 meters, but let's say that with the size of the logs you have, you would come short just a bit by 2.5 meters, or you would come too high. You would need to cut the last log and you would be left just with a thin piece of the log that would be too weak. Then you can again change that height with the size of the sill log. The ideal part of the log to come or up where the floor joist will be of the loft, or for the window and the door header, is in the middle span of the log. You are trying to go for this area to cut out. If you are too low or too high, it weakens the log or you have the rain coming in. And what I didn't take into account when I was calculating how many logs I will need to come to the certain height with the walls, I didn't know that the floor joist will actually come almost more than one log above where the walls actually start. So this means that I will need an extra log to come to the height that I was looking for, because on the inside where the floor will be is pretty much 0.5 meter higher than where the wall starts. When I started, I didn't know how I will do the floor joist and how high the flooring will be. If I would do the walls as I was planning in the beginning, when I would be around 2.5 meters from where the walls start, I would be actually just around 2 meters from the floor joist, and that would be way too low. I miscalculated this, but luckily I have enough logs to do the extra row, and otherwise I would not really be in any problems, but I would just lose more time going back to the forest, taking out the logs and peeling them. I think this is most of the basic stuff you need to know when you are starting and before you are starting with building the log cabin and building the log cabin walls. Maybe another thing that is really helping me is when I wrote down all the log diameters and also all the lengths of the logs, then I arranged which logs I will need for the walls, which logs I will need for the roof and floor joists. I put those logs separately and I imported everything into the Excel table on the computer. That way it's really easy to arrange the logs by the size, from the biggest to the smallest, from the longest log and everything that you need. And you also have the functions to calculate the averages, and when you use one log you delete out from the table and then it automatically calculates the new average of the logs. So that is saving me really tons of time. When I know what size of the log I will need, I just go to the table, I have all the logs numbered, I look at the number, I just go to the pile and I take that log. If I would need to go through all the pile and search by the eye which log might be good, which log is not good, then measure again everything over and over again, that would make me lose hours and hours, and at the end even days, maybe weeks when building the log cabin. Every time when you think, oh, I will just skip this and do it quicker, it will come back later, and either you will be compromising the quality of what you are building, or you will be losing even more time later, because every mistake that you leave unsolved it will just add on more and more problems as you go on. But yeah, this is what I saw to be helpful to know from my experience with building this log cabin and from building some other projects. I think there's no better way than sharing what I learned with other people, because also what I know I learned from other people that are sharing years and years of experience, and also to understand better this style of log cabin building. I've been using the book from Robert Chambers. I will put the link into the description of the video. If you're planning on building your log cabin, my videos might help, but having that book, and also he has a lot of DVDs where he explains everything. I haven't watched DVDs, but I heard from other people that they are really great. I'm in no way paid or anything to promote these CDs, but I think it's a great product and has a lot of knowledge and years of experience. So seeing many comments from people that they want to build their log house, I think this can help a lot and can give you a lot of confidence, because it shows that it's not so difficult to build your log house or log cabin. Also, before I started, I was a bit intimidated by how accurate you need to be with this full scribe technique, and actually you just need to be present when you're working. You need to be thinking about what you're doing and being careful, but other than that there's nothing extremely difficult. At least I didn't saw anything so hard to understand. I hope it was understood what I was trying to explain, and if you have any more questions, please leave them in comments. I will try to answer them if there is something more that you would like to know or whatever. And really, thanks for watching my videos and for following me on my channel and for following me through this journey of building the log cabin. I hope you are having a great day, and hopefully see you as soon as possible in the next video.